for a bit more on what's being said out there today. We've got Belle Lupton here with us. Belle, what's happening online?
Well, the first thing to let you know is that overnight on Sunday, the anonymous hacker group came forward online and posted a video in which they declared all-out war on the Islamic State organisation in response to the attacks in Paris over the weekend. You can see here that Newsweek have covered it. I've got it on my screen now. Newsweek have covered it. They've got the familiar mask that we know of, that we've seen with Anonymous using, obviously, in the past. Anonymous also have distorted their voice. So the man who appears in this video has his voice distorted, kind of in an echo almost of the way that IS put out their propaganda videos. Quite interestingly, sort of, echoing those two things. But anyway, the hacker group, so Anonymous, said, war is declared, get prepared, the French people are stronger than you. Anonymous from all over the world will hunt you down.
I guess the question here is, how much can we actually trust what we're seeing, what we're hearing on Twitter and on Facebook?
It is a bit of a thorny question, because obviously, on the one hand, a lot of the information that we were getting on Friday night was coming via social networks, so whether that was Facebook, Twitter, and so on. But on the other hand, a lot of that information wasn't from necessarily credible sources and couldn't be verified with either a second confirmation or a third confirmation, which is what news outlets would normally seek to do. So how much you can trust it was obviously an issue. Now, the Washington Post looks at that issue around one tweet that came out from a New York-based marketing officer called Rurik Bradbury. Now, he used the Twitter account of his alter ego, Prof. Jeff Jarvis, a.k.a. Scary PJJ 2016. Now, obviously, even the Twitter handle suggests that this is not necessarily a credible source, but, and sorry, I should also add that his profile picture involves him wearing, or a professor wearing a beer-funneled baseball cap. So obviously someone you wouldn't necessarily trust. But anyway, he tweeted this picture of the Eiffel Tower with its lights off, saying that this was in memory of the victims. Now, those of us who live in Paris and work late will know that after about 12:30, the lights cease to come on every hour on the Eiffel Tower. But this tweet spread like wildfire. So by Sunday, nearly 30,000 people had retweeted it.
So what's the story? Was it a mistake on his part? Was it deliberate? And why did he post this?
Well, he says it was deliberate. He says here that in general, he was fascinated by the way history and fake history spreads on Twitter and the very low bar for spreading a viral meme through a credulous public. Now, of course, it's one thing he was essentially doing this for a joke, but it's one thing for regular internet users to fall for that and to retweet it. But there were some regular and legitimate news organisations that also retweeted it. Some of them, says Bradbury, retweeted a photo from January after Charlie Hebdo when the lights did go off in the Tour Eiffel, and they labelled that footage as the 13th of November. So it really highlights the difficulty with how we can separate what's going on online. What is fact? What is not fact? What is perceived reality? What's an innocent mistake? And what is an all-down hoax? But the Washington Post also makes one other point, and this is again Bradbury making this point. Quite interesting here. It does trouble me, says Bradbury, that Facebook scored a PR win from Paris, monetising this monopoly. He's talking there about the safety check that appeared suddenly on Facebook everywhere, people checking in to show that they were safe. If the safety check becomes a default state of affairs, is Facebook then responsible in some way for emergency responses? What then are the implications when someone doesn't post their safety on Facebook? So obviously issues here of whether social media networks can ever replace the news and, of course, other emergency services. Bradbury here suggesting that no, they can't. And I want to just clarify that the lights were on the Tour Eiffel were turned off on Saturday night, but not on Friday night.
Now, Belle, this wasn't the only hoax we've seen over the weekend. Tell us a bit more about some of the others.
Yeah, so BuzzFeed has compiled a list of 12 social media rumours about the Paris attacks that you shouldn't believe. Among them is a screenshot of what appeared to be a prediction or a warning of the attacks dated from the 5th of November. But this isn't what it seems. Actually, so this appeared on the French site Jeux Vidéo, and someone retweeted it saying that this, here we go, here's a prediction of this attack that's going to happen in several places around Paris and will kill more than 100 people. Now, if you actually look at the original website, and the original website has subsequently posted saying, please, enough is enough, what actually actually happened, the actual post said nothing about any attack. What had happened was that person tweeting had altered the screenshot to say what they wanted to say. So you can see how this information does get mixed up. Now, another of these mistakes is a tweet by Donald Trump, which has done the rounds, in which he says, here we go, isn't it interesting that the tragedy in Paris took place in one of the toughest gun control countries in the world? Obviously an issue he likes to toot his horn about quite a lot. The French ambassador to the US replied to this tweet this time, saying this message is repugnant in its lack of any human decency, vulture, calling Donald Trump a vulture. Now, if you try and find that tweet now online on Twitter, you will not be able to find it because the French ambassador has taken it down. But obviously, the reason he's taken it down is because that tweet from Donald Trump was not from this weekend. It was actually from January, and it was a response to the Charlie Hebdo attack. So again, something that's just been mixed up in this whole...
and apparently Donald Trump did tweet this time around, but it was much more measured.
Absolutely. And the problem is everything is all circulating at once. We don't necessarily have time to check the dates and times on things as we're going. So that's how all this confusion arises. One last one on from that BuzzFeed article. An image of a deserted street in Paris, again, that's done the rounds. I had friends outside of Paris who were looking at this image thinking, is this what it's looking like right now? That's terrifying. But this image is from 2008. It's from an art project in 2008. It is not from this weekend. So again, another of these mistakes that come out via social networks.
Thanks for that, Belle. It's interesting to see how these articles can be debunked. As the dust settles now, new stories are still emerging from people who were at the locations that were hit, and you've picked out one to share with us.
Yeah, this is a little ray of sunshine in an otherwise horrible, tragic events of the weekend. And the Huffington Post picks up this story of a couple. The headline, or the first line there, is, "It was a fight that saved their life. C'était une dispute qui les a sauvés." Now, the reason for that was that they were sat outside on the terrace, at the Belle Équipe restaurant in La Charonne, in la rue de la Charonne, de Charonne rather, and as they were sitting down for dinner, they had a fight. And this fight led to the man storming off out away from the terrace, and the woman went inside to settle up the bill before obviously leaving and joining her boyfriend. Whilst that was happening, the attack began. So the people, the terrorists essentially arrived and started shooting at that moment. Had they not moved 5 minutes before, they would have been one of those victims, but they managed to escape.
It's incredible. Belle Lupton, thank you so much for that Media Watch